Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of Zdenek's English podcast. And this is part 2 of the interview I recorded with Gabriel from the Clark and Miller English podcast. Don't forget, this is a podcast for English learners just like mine. And Gabriel is a fantastic teacher and has a great podcast that reminds me of Luke's English podcast a little bit. What's going to happen in this episode? Well, there's only one way to find out. Listen to it. But I would also like to tell you that there is a video version available that you can watch. So you can obviously listen or watch. You have a choice. However, I apologize for the quality of the video. It's not ideal because I've been having some issues with my upload. I'm sorry. I haven't fixed it yet, and it's been taking for almost 1 month, and it's really annoying. There's one more thing I would like to tell you. If you happen to be in Prague on the 18th of March 2022, supposing you listen to this before that date, obviously, then why don't you pop into the Sherwood pub, or the Sherwood, I don't know if it's a restaurant, but I think it's a pub, which is right next to Hlavní nádraží. Yeah, Hlavní nádraží, it's like the main Czech railway station. It's in Prague. Why don't you pop in and have a beer with me, or I don't know, a tea or whatever, and we can have a chat. There will be interesting people from other countries as well, but we will mostly speak Czech, but possibly English too. It could be a combination of both. And I'll also bring some games. It's a meetup of my other podcast, the Czech one, but I don't mind having some Zdenek's English podcast listeners there as well. If you guys happen to be around, why don't you pop in? Sherwood, the pub is called Sherwood, and it's literally, 200 meters away from the building of Hlavní nádraží in Prague, okay? Okay, and one last thing I have to say, of course, is I have to repeat that I stand with Ukraine. I fully support the Ukrainian president, and my heart goes out to Ukrainian people, all those people that have lost their loved ones, and this is something no one expected, and it's an absolute tragedy. And I know there are some Russians listening to this. I just want to let you know that if you believe that this is right, if you believe that trying to invade a country, an independent country, is justified in any way, then you should be ashamed of yourselves. However, if you are Russians that side with me, that understand what I'm saying, and that understand the point of view we have here in the West, which I know there are loads of. I know there are loads of Russians like that. I have got some friends. Then don't worry, I'm not going to tar everyone with the same brush. I am not. But this has to really be called out, and this has to be stopped. And we all need to unite against the same enemy. And I know I'm not helping much by saying these things, but I will say them anyway, because if there's at least one person that I make that person think about this, then I've done my job, I guess. We've got more than 200,000 refugees now in the Czech Republic. In my city of Poděbrady, in my town, it's a small town, ladies and gentlemen. We have, I think, at least 200, it could be even more now, at least 200 refugees, it could be 300. And it's bound to be more. It's an unprecedented situation for my country, and I know it's the same in Poland. They have more than 1 million refugees there. We're trying to help as much as we can, but naturally this is going to mean that we'll have to tighten our belts as well, and this will lead to an economic crisis. The prices of oil, of gas, have increased significantly. That hasn't happened for like decades. So it's an absolute madness right now here in this part of the world, and Putin is he's a bad guy, guys. And if you still think that Putin's actions can be justified in any way, then I can't help you. Like, you are beyond help, I'm afraid. I hope I don't have any listeners like that. And if I do, then I can't tell you to stop listening to the podcast, but I'm ashamed that you do listen, because this is violation of human rights. What we are talking about here. There is evidence of Russian soldiers attacking the nuclear power plant. There's evidence of Russian soldiers killing people, killing innocent children in a children's hospital. There are now videos of Russian soldiers using some forbidden weapons, some phosphorite or some biological weapons, and Putin is threatening to use even worse things. All I can say is, if you can't see that this person is evil and then has to be stopped and assassinated, I can't help you guys. I really can't. Anyway, it's time to cheer you guys up. Please enjoy this part 2 of the interview with Gabriel from the Clark and Miller English podcast. Cheers. Beep, 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 beep. Shut up. I'm listening to Zdenek's English podcast. You're listening to Zdenek's English podcast, a podcast for English learners at B1, B2 and C1 levels. You are also into hot takes on language. So could you give us? That sounds really interesting. Hot takes on language. So is it like, when you say hot takes, does it mean like the current trends and something like that?
No, I don't. I've actually nicked this word. I've stolen this word off another podcast, a non-English language learning podcast. It's probably my favorite podcast. It's called the Blind Boy podcast. It's quite popular. It's a big podcast. It's an Irish one. And this guy, Blind Boy, came up with this. I think he came up with this phrase, hot take. And it's like a kind of creating a narrative out of different things and bringing them together. And it's almost like a conspiracy, but it's not. It's just like a way of collaging facts and giving it a certain perspective. Shall I go on?
Yeah, I'm
give an example.
quite intrigued to know some examples. So could you give us an example?
Right. I don't think I can think of any Blind Boy examples from the top of my head, but
when you say hot takes on language, what do you mean by that?
Okay, so let's look at one on language. So I mean, hot take is basically, the way I see it is just like an interesting way to look at something. Basically, that's all. So one of my favorite ESL writers, that's English as a second, ELT writers, he writes for English teachers, is the late Mike Lewis. You're very familiar with him, right? Because you're really into lexical learning. Shall I explain what this stuff is as I go?
Why not?
Why not? So in a nutshell, lexical learning is not looking so much at language as a system, but more looking at it as a collection of phrases that we use in certain situations. That's a very, very simple, maybe too simple description. But you don't need to look at the grammar of something to learn it. Just look at the whole thing and see where you would use it, when it's appropriate, right?
The chunks.
Chunks of language. Much more effective way of learning, and it gives you a much more natural way of learning. If you learn a phrase like, could you open the door, please? It's much more effective than learning the modal could and how to form a question, and then somehow arriving at the conclusion that could you open the door, please, is the correct sentence, because you could end up with all sorts of crazy sentences like may you make the door open or whatever. Learning in natural phrases. So Mike Lewis, before he started developing this technique, he wrote a book called The English Verb. Have you read it?
I haven't. But I've read
it's a
the
good book.
the what's it called, the lexical
Mhm.
approach, or what's
The
the
lexical
main book?
approach or lexical learning? I can't
I
remember.
can't
He's got a
remember what the
couple of
main book
books.
is called, but I used to
Yeah,
I
me too.
used it once
I've read
during
it
my
too.
Delta. I used it for one of my Delta essays. Yeah.
It's a great book. Yeah,
Mhm.
I know the one. I have read it, but I can't. Yeah, lexical something blah blah blah.
Yeah.
It's one of it's a seminal piece of work, and I can't remember the name, but yeah. But before he read that, he's done a bunch of stuff, and one book that blew me away was his book on not lexical learning, on the English verb, and he is basically a book on, I would say, hot takes, but because he's looking at the way verbs work in such a sort of meta way. Let's look at an example, right? Okay, so the easiest example to give is looking at the past simple tense, right?
Okay.
Okay, so we got the past simple tense, right?
Mhm.
Why do we use the past simple tense? If you ask anyone, what's the first thing they'll say?
Is that a question for me? So
Yeah,
to describe a past event, let's say.
right. This is the classic answer. And to be fair,
Yeah.
this is the most common use of the past tense. But what about sentences like, well, could you open the door, please? Or yeah, he could be here by 7 o'clock. Or
Mm.
I wish I was Brad Pitt. Or what was your name again? Or if we did this, nothing would ever happen.
Mm.
Like we use the past
Yeah.
tense in all sorts of situations which are
Well,
not about the past.
technically, those are modal verbs used for, let's say,
Hmm.
hypothetical situations or
Ah, hmm.
deduction, speculation about the past, future,
Yeah.
or present. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Well, which example were you thinking of? Because I just hit you with loads
Well,
of
you said
examples.
you gave a lot of different examples. So
Hmm.
could you open? It could be.
Okay.
What did you say? It could be someone. I can't remember
I think I said
exactly.
I wish I was Brad Pitt.
Well, that's a wish clause. You're talking about the present. So basically, hypothetical situation. You are not Brad Pitt. You cannot be Brad Pitt, and that's why formally we use past tense.
Correct. Right.
It's
But
the
it's not
wish.
about the
Yeah.
past.
No, it's
Yeah.
not. No.
Yeah. Yeah. Could you open the door? Is could. It's like it's a past form of can, right?
It's like a request. Yeah.
But it's a request, yeah.
Mhm.
So like Michael Lewis, we have this in English learning and teaching all the time. Here is a rule, except for this situation, except for this situation, except for there are so many exceptions, right? And
Yeah.
he's saying, like, if there are so many exceptions, then this isn't the rule. What
Mhm.
is the rule? He's trying to find the rule that has no exceptions. So
Yeah.
this is what I like. He goes very, very deep into the English verb. His hot take about this so-called past tense is that it isn't about the past. It is about distance. It
Mm.
adds distance. So when we use it in the past to talk about the past, yeah, is adding temporal distance. It's adding a
Mhm.
time distance
Yep.
in the past. It's making it further away. But could you open the door? Is like he's
Spatial
saying,
distance. Yeah. Or
ah, well,
I don't
yeah.
know.
Well, you're on the right track. Like a spatial distance in terms of like a distance of register. Like it's more
Ah.
polite. So like,
Okay.
can you
Yeah.
open the door and
Mhm.
could you open the door? Could you is
Mhm.
slightly more polite. You make it past, you're giving a bit more distance and it's more formal. It's more
Yeah.
polite, right? Yeah. So you have this sort of interpersonal distance.
Exactly.
And the same thing is quite similar with what was your name again? You don't say what's your name again. What was your name again? You're
Yeah.
creating a sort of distance from
Mhm.
yeah, I guess it's a more
Even
formal
though
thing.
we are not really talking about the past at all. Yeah.
Yeah, that your name's still your name, right?
Yeah.
Like I'm not thinking it's changed. Yeah, and the classic is the hypothetical thing, right? I
Yeah.
wish I was Brad Pitt. If we did this differently, things would be better. And this is
Mhm.
creating a distance of reality. We're
Yeah.
distancing ourselves from reality. And yeah, that kind of works, right? When you think about it abstractly
Mhm.
like that covers every time we use this past tense.
Yeah.
There you go.
Now
That's an example of a hot take in English.
that's very interesting. Now the question I have is, how can you sell it to students? Because doesn't it sound too, do you know what I mean? Like, how do you
Mhm.
wrap it? How do you wrap it
Yeah.
so that students find it easy to digest? Because sometimes you have to go, when especially when working with beginners, you have to go for what's called pedagogical simplification. You just have to make things
Yeah.
simple. So you tell your students, don't use if and will in one clause. Well, we both know that there are cases where you can do that.
There are,
Yeah,
yeah, but generally
but
speaking,
you
it
you
works.
you tell it to your students because
Mhm.
you want to make things simple and easy to follow, easy to understand. You want to make logic out of the language.
Absolutely, yeah. And
So
you don't
that's
want to.
that's that's that's
Mhm.
my like
Yeah, yeah,
counter argument basically.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And you don't want to over like complicate things either. And paradoxically, this could making it simpler like this can actually make it more complicated.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to choose. You know your students better than anyone else, right? Every teacher knows their students better than anyone else. You need to like decide when and if to make that call.
Mm.
I mean, I think there's nothing particularly wrong, especially at lower levels, to say this is a rule and
Yeah.
introduce exceptions later. I don't. I think I might disagree on Michael Lewis in the sense that he says you shouldn't do that. It misleads students, and I think people are quite intelligent. Most people
Mhm.
they can accept exceptions and they can accept ambiguities and things like that. But sometimes you have like a high level student, and I've had situations where I've explained this stuff to them, and it made a lot of things make sense for them. But
Yeah.
a higher level student and one who's prepared to think abstractly about grammar.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It depends on the student. It's yeah. As a teacher, you have to decide yourself
Yeah. You
what's
have to.
appropriate.
You have to make some decisions, and I think what's also involved in this is the, shall I call it, tradition or traditional way of doing things, because
Hmm.
it's like the whole industry, or let's say all the course books are designed in a certain way, and it's always difficult to just change things. Like, even he came with this cool idea, and it's very popular. Like, they talk about it at Delta, the Delta tutors, the academics. But then another thing is to start implementing it. So I know there's this
Hmm.
guy Hugh Deller, I think.
Oh, a
Hugh
big
Deller,
fan of Hugh. Yeah, yeah. He's like,
yeah,
yeah. He's great.
he's the big one of the biggest names now. Who I think he wrote a course book, which is entirely
Teaching
based on
lexically.
teaching
Hmm.
lexically.
It's a Delta
So
Publishing, I think. Yeah.
it is possible, but again, it's still kind of niche. Like, the last time I worked for a language school was in London, and I don't remember us having that book there at disposal.
Hmm.
It's always New English file, which, in my humble opinion, are the best books on the market. Yeah, I don't
Hmm.
always teach using course books. Actually, these days I don't use them at all. I prefer the dogma method.
Okay.
Just
Yeah. Yeah. I'm a big
yeah.
fan of Dogma too. Yeah. Scott Thornbury and Luke Medding's thing. Yeah. Yeah.
But my point, I guess, is that it's difficult. Like, when you come up with something like this, which is a
Hmm.
bit different, or gives you a different kind of perspective, or different looks at things from a different angle, it's
Hmm.
difficult to implement it because of the general perception, or the general standards, or the traditions, and then just how do you break through that? So
That's really interesting. Yeah, I guess so, because it's not just, it may also be the institution you're working at that they
yeah,
might have strict regulations about what you can and can't do, but not just that, like expectations of the students.
exactly,
Mhm,
yeah.
mhm. Yeah, I mean, you just have to. I guess if you've got the same students for a prolonged period of time, then sure, you can just get them to get used to this
Yeah.
way of doing things if you think it's going to be more efficient in the long run.
You need to make them
Um,
trust you. Once they trust you,
mhm,
you can do almost anything.
yeah.
But, well, I
Hmm.
remember having students there who would just, because I have to be honest, as a non-native English teacher, I've always been into grammar. I always liked to
Grammar's
understand
fun.
how grammar
Yeah,
works. Yeah, but
yeah,
but the more I teach, the less the more I realize that it's not the most important thing at all.
yeah.
But what I want to say is that, when I was working for Speak Up London, there were some students who really appreciated the fact that I knew so much about grammar, and they kind of expected me to explain things and to look at everything from the grammatical point of view, which now I don't necessarily think is the best approach. So it's kind of funny how your
Yeah.
views can even shift like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of like that about being a
Yeah.
teacher for this long, that
Mhm.
going all over the place. I love grammar a lot. It's not very cool at the moment in teaching world to
No.
be focused, but I understand why, because too many learners still think grammar is the path to successful language learning, and it's a small part of the path. Like
It's overrated.
most
Yeah.
most people need to kind of be pulled away from it because they need to start focusing on things like vocabulary chunks and things like that, chunks of language,
Collocations and
collocations,
phrasal verbs.
yeah,
I, I don't think
lexicogrammar, all
I'm
this
I'm
stuff. Yeah.
yeah, I'm kind of a sucker for even idioms, but I actually
Hmm.
again I have shifted my views on this. I think they are overrated a little bit,
Hmm.
but I like them anyway, and they kind of belong to
Hmm.
that category of chunks. So yeah.
Yeah, I think there's more. Yeah, you can justify introducing more idioms into your language lessons than more grammar at the moment.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, yeah, because again, the focus is still among students. Most of the ELT world, even the course book writers, have started realizing that grammar. Well, started realizing. What am I talking about? Are well aware
Yeah.
of this. You know, we all know it, and the industry is also catching up on that. But a lot of students' expectations are very much rooted in grammar, and I guess that's the thing that is a big challenge still. You know, we still need to try
Yeah.
and bring the emphasis to other things. Yeah.
It's difficult to break all these stereotypes and
Mhm.
once
Yeah.
people think in a certain way, how do you change that? It's so
Yeah.
tough. Even if you prove it, if you prove it, like academically you prove it, yeah, there is research done into this, and still you can't change people's
If
minds.
Eddie,
It's
if
this.
Eddie, we know in like a post 2016 world is that research and facts don't convince people anything.
Yeah,
We live in a post-truth
I often
environment
go
now.
on this podcast. I often go on a rant regarding native speakerism as well,
Oh
and
God,
things
please
like
do it.
that. Yeah, so it's the
I'm
same.
with
Like
you on that. Yeah.
people have certain stereotypes. They believe in something, like for example that native speaker teachers should be always paid more, or they are more valuable, whatever it is. And then it's impossible to get it out of people's heads no matter
Mm-hmm.
what you do.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So that it's
That's
just
such a
another.
struggle. Yeah.
I'm giving you another example. I don't want to go into
Mhm.
that here,
No,
but
and fair enough.
yeah,
It's not an example I come across myself, right? Because being a native speaker, I don't have this issue, but it's such a problem with the industry
yeah.
at the
But
moment. Yeah, the stuff you see that
you
people are
say
only
that.
asking for native teachers. Yeah.
Exactly, but you say that, but even native teachers struggle because of there's maybe, I don't know, it could be
Hmm.
racism, they could be that they are
Hmm.
not British. They don't have the standard British accent.
Yeah.
Let's say they
Yeah.
have Scottish accent or
Hmm.
Northern Irish accent,
Hmm.
and I think they go through similar
Yeah.
struggles. Yeah, so it's not even, we can't even say it's native speakers versus non-native speakers. That
Okay.
it's such a
I'll
complex. It's
I'll
such a
rephrase. I
complex.
don't have this problem as a white
Yeah,
male
yeah.
posh British English speaker. I have none of these
Middle
problems.
aged,
Yeah.
or
Middle
I
age,
don't know.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, you have
No,
to say all
I'd
these
say
things,
middle age.
so because it's
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
and I'm probably at the most privileged category of any teacher out there. So, but I mean, it is absolutely ridiculous. You see some crazy stuff out there about the discrimination against native teachers being paid less, not even getting jobs,
yeah.
and you see lots of absolutely incompetent native speakers becoming teachers and doing a terrible job, but keeping their jobs because just simply where they're from. Yeah.
And in the same breath, there are a lot of incompetent non-native teachers. Yeah, I'm
To
not.
be fair,
I've never denied that. Like when you
but
see some of
that's
the,
not an issue at the moment. I
it's
think it's
not
not.
right.
It's not
But you
where
know
the
what I
problem
mean.
is.
Like I also get that point too. But
Mhm,
it's
mhm,
just convincing people that it shouldn't judge you based on your passport, skin color. So it's just so difficult to break all these stereotypes
mhm.
that people have. Why
Yeah,
are people not more open-minded, for Christ's sake,
I
Gabriel?
know. It's not that hard, right? Yeah,
No.
especially these days. The world's changing so quickly all the time. Like this isn't a big leap, big jump. But yeah, it is. So like in Czech Republic, what's the situation like? Is it quite bad in these times?
Well, there is another aspect that once you like, if I were to teach only, because I don't necessarily enjoy teaching Czech students. Yeah, I like to work with a mix of students, international students. That's where I'm the most comfortable at. So I think if you are an English teacher in the Czech Republic and you only teach Czech people, you are fine. Yeah, I think you are fine. The problem, but when you try to find your own clients online or start a podcast or YouTube channel, I just realized I didn't want to talk about this here, but
No, you should be able to talk about this. This is an important topic.
It's just I feel like there's it's I find it harder to make it just because that person is less likely. But that's the same. The racism works in exactly the same way. So if you are let's say black or of a minority and you find it harder to get a job, it's exactly the same, you know. So I often make these comparisons, or I don't know, let's say if you're from the LGBT community, same thing. Yeah, you struggle more, and it just bothers me. I think we should all be equal. We should have equal opportunities, and no, it shouldn't be like that. But it's difficult to change people's minds, you know.
It is, evidently. Yeah. No, I totally agree with you. I wish there was a simple way to solve this issue. I guess the best thing is to just keep talking about it until people see the light.
No.
Hopefully they do. Yeah.
Yeah. We're not trying to preach here or anything, listeners, by the way. It's just I'm ranting and it makes me angry. It pisses me off on a human level personally, and I'm sure Gabriel might have his own
it pisses me off
things
too.
that piss him off, maybe something else. Yeah, we are just humans.
Yeah. And no, it's a serious issue. I think it should be talked about.
Yeah, but it's like other things in society, like racism. It's not just this, right? It's just one.
Oh yeah, sure, but this is where we are with our professions, so we need to address it within our immediate environment.
Yeah, thank you, Gabriel, for having these views. By the way, I really appreciate it.
It's I don't think I can help having these views. I think it's just how I feel about the situation, but appreciated. Yeah.
So, Grices Maxims. I remember. I vaguely remember. Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Grices Maxims.
Yeah.
Grice. Okay. I vaguely remember studying about this at university. I may have had it in one of my courses, but I don't. Is it about how we should communicate or something like that?
Yes, Grices Maxims. I wouldn't say it's about how we should communicate. You know, he's a linguist. He's not a prescriptivist. He's not telling people how to behave. He is describing how we communicate, right? So it's very objective stuff. Shall I describe the maxims?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. I do have a podcast episode on this, one of the very first ones, but I'll try and do this very quickly. So Grice has something called the cooperative principle. So the cooperative principle is basically whenever we're communicating, like today, we're having a chat and we're talking, and that what we're trying to say, let me rephrase that communication is flowing between us, right? This is our kind of main aim, that we understand each other and we make things as clear as we can when we're communicating with each other, right? This is how most people communicate, and that's kind of the main operative principle of a conversation or any sort of communication between more than one person. Okay, So far so good. So the cooperative principle, that's the thing that makes us do this. And within the cooperative principle, there are 5 maxims that Grice identifies that we follow in order to keep ourselves following the cooperative principles. Means that we can basically understand each other, right? God, I'm going to forget these, aren't I? So there's the maxim of quantity. So this is like, I don't give you too much information and I don't withhold information. I give you the right amount of information for us to be able to understand each other, right?
Yeah.
There's the maxim of quality. That's basically how true something is. I give you information that I believe to be true, right? I don't lie directly, and I don't talk about stuff I don't really know is true. That's if I'm following these
fake
maxims,
news.
right?
Fake news is out of the question.
Yeah, well, the maxims are very interesting in this day and age because of the way the internet's working. We can look at the internet through the maxims in a very, it'll reveal a lot about how people like communicate online. Okay, let's see if I can remember the others. The maxim of relevance, that what you say something, then I say something, and that's relevant to what we were just talking about.
Yeah.
So that's that. The maxim of like, basically it's a maxim of like comprehensibility. Like I respond with words. I don't go yeah. Like, it's comprehensive.
Yeah.
And I bet I'm going to forget the fifth maxim.
Well, it doesn't
doesn't
matter.
matter.
You I think
get
you
the
gave us a
idea.
really good idea of what this is.
Okay.
So as I understand it, these are some principles that you should follow in order to be effective when you communicate with someone, right? Or
yes, but I would avoid that word should, because should implies that it's like a guide or something. It's not anything like that. It's basically when we communicate well, these maxims are functioning well. We see that happening when this happens.
Yeah.
Okay, so far so good, right?
Lovely.
So the cooperative principle is intact when the maxims are followed. But when we communicate, it goes a step further, and this is where it gets really interesting. When we communicate, we don't follow these maxims very often, and there are two ways you cannot follow the maxim. One is like completely breaking the maxim, and if you're doing that, you're breaking the cooperative principle. So you're sabotaging the communication, whether deliberately or not. Right.
Okay.
This happens a lot. When people are nervous, they give too much information and they start breaking the maxim of quantity. Right. Like, calm down. Just like say it slowly. For example. But we can also flout the maxims, and we do this regularly to make jokes, to be ironic, to be playful with our language. All the really interesting stuff that happens with language.
Yeah.
Happens when we're flouting the maxims. The cooperative principle is intact. For example, okay, you say, I know, like I've just come back. You see me and I've had my hair cut, right?
Yeah.
And you say, oh, wow, cool. Hey, you got your hair cut. And I could say something like, no, I got in a fight with a rhino, actually.
I'm
being sarcastic, right?
It's like, duh.
Yeah, it's like, duh. But I'm definitely not following the maxim of quantity there. This is not true, right? But you know that, and I know that. And the cooperative principle is still intact. So there's flouting and there's breaking the maxims. And when you can distinguish that, you know whether communication is working or not.
Yeah.
Basically, that's it.
So we are basically talking about sarcasm, irony, and all these things as well. It's all combined.
Pragmatics as well, like even just simple everyday communication. Like I know you're in your house with your partner and somebody rings the doorbell and you say, oh, there's someone at the door, and your partner says like, oh, I'm in the bath. All right, that's which relevant,
means,
right?
Which means I'm not going to open the door. You should do it.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's a completely clear piece of communication. The cooperative principle is completely intact. It's unsurprising. It's even unremarkable, really. This isn't a strange thing to say, but it doesn't follow the maxim.
Absolutely. And it's also about understatements, and basically I think it's really important to understand this. Like you might not know all these terms, of course. It sounds very abstract and academic and whatnot. But actually in reality, if you follow these principles, you will be more effective when it comes to, as you say, cooperation, communication, and when it comes to specifically British people. I think it's like there's another level because you tend to be very indirect, right? So I think that comes into play as well here.
Yeah, I think not thinking about following the principles, but seeing how the principles are flouted could be, as a learner, this could be a useful way for a learner to start to understand so-called native speakers. If that really is your goal. Most learners don't actually have that goal, but if that is indeed your goal, to be able to sit in a pub with some British people, for example, and understand what the hell they're talking about. If something seems weird and you don't understand what's going on, probably the maxims are being flouted. and you're losing the cooperative
Yeah.
principle somehow. Yeah.
And this is also like when you say native speaker, but I think there's a massive difference between a native speaker from the UK, native speaker from the US, and the native speaker from, I don't know, South Africa. You know,
Oh
so
yeah, I'd go
it's
further
yeah,
than that. I'd say there's a
yeah,
difference between a native speaker from a
but
working class native speaker from
yeah,
Bristol and a middle
yeah.
class working native speaker from like Birmingham, which is just like a 50 kilometers away. Like, yeah.
That's really cool. So
Everyone's different. Sorry.
yeah, so if my listeners want to know more about this, you said you've recorded an episode on this. So what?
Yes, we got an episode on Grices Maxims. Yeah. It's
Okay,
very
so
long and in depth. So if you're really into it, like, yeah, it's a deep dive.
and you say it's one of the earliest episodes. So just scroll down through Gabriel's episodes once you subscribe to the Clark and Miller English podcast.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
it's a red one. We have red episodes. Usually it's blue. We have red ones. Red ones are more about linguistics, language, and teacher
Okay.
stuff. Yeah.
Okay. So it's not like red flag episode or something.
Well, it's a red flag in the sense that it's like this is a bit challenging. But if you're interested in that, yeah.
Or it's not nothing like certificate 18 or something like that. No.
No, I think I've sworn more on this than I have on all of my podcast episodes. Like just in this last hour, I think I've done more swearing than I have in the last 20, 30 episodes of the
Nice one.
podcast. Yeah.
Brilliant. So you also said to me that you have written an article on endonyms and exonyms. To be honest with you, I probably did this at university, but all I can remember is synonyms, antonyms, and homonyms and homophones. You know?
I'm just bringing it up because I wrote it for languageonlineservices.com. It's another website. I didn't do it for my own website. But yeah, what was the question? I was just
what are they?
Yeah, it's quite simple. Yeah, endonyms and exonyms. I didn't really know about them either until I did the research for the article.
Okay.
But yeah, they're quite interesting. Names for okay, so what is the Czech Republic in Czech? It's Czechia, right? You say Czechia for when you name your country in your own language.
No, it was always the Czech Republic, but about 4 years ago, was it 5 years ago? I can't remember. The politicians decided that it would be better for business if the country's name was simplified. There was no referendum. They didn't ask the people. Everybody hated that. So
really?
Nobody really in the Czech Republic, nobody really uses that English term Czechia. Some people, I say nobody, some people might.
Okay.
But it takes a long time for people to get used to it because it's just something that politicians decided to do. You know how it is sometimes when politicians decide without asking you for your opinion. People don't really take kindly to that. So it's interesting with Czechia. It's not really very popular here. Yeah.
This is quite an interesting example. So it's not going to be a very clear example. So I'm going to give you a clear example first. Like Deutschland, okay?
Yeah.
This word Deutschland. Like obviously this isn't English. This is German, right?
Yep.
And this is the word for Germany that the Germans use in Germany. So this is an endonym. It's what these people call themselves, right? Or the name of their country in this case.
Yeah.
Whereas, Nemci or Almania or Germania, there are lots of other words for Germany, depending on where you're from. And these are exonyms, right? So this is the name given to a group of people by not those people, essentially.
Right.
Yeah.
Do you know what? I've just realized that it's like actually like endo. It's like if I think of more words which start with this prefix, I think it's a Latin prefix that means like inside, and exo is outside, like exodus and
exoskeleton.
Yeah. So it must be where it comes from. Actually,
I think it's it. Yeah. You have the exterior, exo, and then the endo, which must be interior. Yeah.
Inside or in, or something like that.
Yeah, something like that. I guess I didn't check. Yeah. So Czechia is an interesting example because this is a mandated endonym. The government have mandated that the endonym is now Czechia, but I think they were also asking the rest of the world to call them Czechia too, right? This was like a request.
No, you can see like
you please call us Czechia now. Stop calling us the Czech Republic. Is that what they did?
I think the idea was that it would be better for like international politics and for international business. I think because like you can see that this term is now used on websites like, I don't know, Amazon, or it just makes things easier. It's a shorter name.
So
other
people did start using it, right?
I think they will
like
eventually.
Amazon, for example. Yeah.
No, absolutely.
I mean, I think I started using it because I thought that's what the people of Czech Republic wanted. I'm getting new information now, so maybe I should go back to calling it Czech Republic. I don't know.
To be honest, I'm not that bothered myself.
Yeah,
but
I mean,
a lot of people
sure.
were kind of enraged about that. So I don't know. Like I'm okay.
Yes, I mean, it's an interesting example now because is this an exonym? Is it an endonym? For some people, it's an exonym. For some people, it's an endonym. For some people, it's neither. It doesn't exist. Yeah, and this happens sometimes. Like Iran used to be called Persia until one of the Shahs publicly requested that the world change the name to Iran, and everyone was just agreed. Everyone said, "Okay, fine, you're Iran now. We don't mind." So that was like another mandated endonym and exonym, and it was successful because everyone went for it. Yeah, that's all. But the more you look into it, I mean, like some of the endonyms and exonyms can get very political as well. Like you can enter some really strange territory. Like a very potent example would be like the Roma and the Roma people, right? Who are often referred to as gypsies, right? But this is an exonym that is also a sort of discriminatory sort of exonym, right? People who use that word tend to be discriminating against them. Did you know it came? I didn't know this until I researched this article. This word gypsy comes from Egypt. The word Egypt, because it sounds right, doesn't it? And a lot of people mistakenly thought Roma came from Egypt, which isn't true. Because something to do with the Old Testament Bible or something like that. That was their source material there. I thought that was quite interesting. But yeah, obviously, like what exonyms, whether to use an exonym or whether to use an endonym can be tricky, right? You need to choose the right words sometimes. Otherwise, it can be quite offensive.
No, you're making a good point, because obviously words can change their meaning, especially these, let's say, proper nouns that refer to a nation. And then when something happens historically, or just there's some sort of oppression, discrimination, then the name, you need to use the word connotation. It changes its connotative meaning. Its connotation is different. So we don't have to go far. It's let's say the N word used to be okay hundreds years ago. But obviously now it's considered the most offensive word.
That's a very potent exonym. Yeah.
So it's this is really it's like a living organism. It goes through changes and develops all the time.
Yeah. One more interesting thing about that too, as well. I mean, that's true. Where we see discrimination with exonyms and endonyms all the time, but there's a little quirky thing. What's the name of your hometown?
Poděbrady.
Poděbrady. Yeah. Okay. And in other languages, it's the same, right? Poděbrady.
It has to be. Like, it's too small for it to have a small.
Okay, you're 2 steps ahead of me. Yeah, you're 2 steps ahead of me, right? So, but like Prague has different names depending on which language you're using, right? Because
that's right.
It's important. So if your hometown has an exonym, or lots of exonyms in other languages, it probably means it's important and has some sort of geopolitical or historical significance. Interestingly, Reykjavik, there are a bunch of capital cities that don't have exonyms in English, like Reykjavik, or I can't remember any of the others. But it seems that it's possible that these cities were not very important historically. We never gave them an anglicized name.
Could it also be because these... could it be about how difficult it was to pronounce those names? Because let's say if the name is easy to pronounce, there might not have been a need for it, right?
That's true. Yeah, like Paris. Although Paris is a little different, and there's another story with that one. But generally speaking, okay, Oslo, like that's easy to pronounce in almost every language, right? So I guess
Exactly.
Oslo is Oslo in more or less every language,
Yeah.
even though
But
it has historic.
then you could
importance.
also talk about how far do you go with the change, because it could be the change could be just in terms of pronunciation, but it could also be the spelling. Yeah, so in the case of Prague, it's both pronunciation and spelling, but maybe with Oslo, this is how you spell it in Norwegian. I presume, I could be
I
wrong,
presume so. Yeah.
but if not, we would be able to find other examples of this. But then it's possible that, I don't know, do Norwegians pronounce it in the same way as
That's a
the
good
Brits do?
question. Yeah,
I
I
don't
don't know. Maybe it's pronounced like Islu or something. I don't know. Yeah, I have no Norwegian friends to check this with.
Well, if you have some Norwegian listeners listening to this, please let us know.
Yeah, I'd like to know how Oslo is pronounced, actually. Yeah.
Me too.
But yeah,
Nice.
good question. Is it an endonym or an exonym when the pronunciation changes? Yeah, I guess the line can move depending on how you're analyzing it. Yeah.
I love it. So if the listeners want to find out more about this, again, Gabriel is the man. So you wrote an article about it. So where can they find the article on your blog?
Article, it's not mine. No, I wrote this for languageonlineservices.com. You can find it on that website, languageonlineservices.com. I've written quite a lot of articles. I seem to be the NIM guy for those guys. The NIM guy, I've done like endonyms, meronyms, antonyms, like various NIMs. There are a whole bunch of articles. I think I've written about 20 articles on NIMs. So languageonlineservices.com, you can find it there.
Nice one. Brilliant. One more thing, you said that you are interested in grammar in an abstract way. So I think we have kind of already talked about. I think it's obvious by now what you mean by that. Yeah.
If you want another example of that, I'm going to plug my YouTube channel. The last video I put up was called God's Tense. It isn't God is tense, it's God's tense, like the tense that belongs to God. And that's again, it's adapted from the Mike Lewis book, but it's about the present simple, why the present simple is God's tense. So
can I have a guess?
Check that out. Yeah,
can I guess? We don't want to spoil your video. I'm just gonna make an educated guess here.
Okay.
Well, it's used to talk about all sorts of different time periods. Yeah? So it could be used to talk about the future, the past, and the present. So this is my what's the word for it? Guess.
Okay. Well, I'm not going to confirm or deny whether you're right. You'll have to go and check out the video.
Fantastic. It's been brilliant to talk to you, Gabriel.
Thanks so much. I really enjoyed this a lot. Actually, it was really cool. Really cool.
Likewise.
Topics.
Yeah, exactly. The great choice of topics, very varied as well.
Yeah, thanks so much, Zdenek. Yeah,
you were welcome. A little bit geeky at times, but I enjoyed myself. Hopefully,
me too.
so did the listeners.
I hope so. Yeah, that was going to say. I hope the listeners got something out of it too. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thanks again, man. Thanks so much for having me on. Really appreciate it.
You're very welcome, and good luck with your podcast. And let's keep in touch.
Thanks a lot. Yeah, let's keep in touch. I'll see you whenever I see you.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Cool. Cheers. Bye-bye, everyone.
Cheers.
Hey.
Bye.
Thanks a lot for listening. For more information, go to Zdenek's English Podcast Facebook group or visit zdenek'senglishpodcast.podbean.com.
Listening to podcasts can help you with your listening skills. If you wish to work on your speaking skills, join my brand new Discord group called Learn English Online. You will find the invite link on my website, teacherzdenek.com, ZEP section.